Don, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be here.
Me too. I'm super psyched. I'm doing well. Dog's over here sleeping in the background. But he's like,
remain quiet.
yeah. He's kind of looking at me and asking when are we gonna go OUTSIDE, but I can't say it because he'll go crazy. But anyways, let's get started. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell the audience, who you are, what you do, kind of your journey from kind of beginning up until now.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it short. I've gotten pretty good at my pitch. So my name's Dawn Wages. I am the Python community product manager at Microsoft. I've only been there for a few months, so I'm pretty new in the product management route, but I was a project manager 6 or 7 odd years ago. So my story begins maybe MySpace when I was like teens or late teens, went into business school, and hadn't touched code for a while since MySpace, mostly HTML and CSS with like some aspirations of trying to be entrepreneurial in high school with it, but didn't pick up much with that for a lot of reasons. And so then after school, with my business degree in tow, I wanted to get into finance, and finance was not my bag. We can say it, we can cut it that like finance kicked me out, or I said kicked finance to the curb. I don't know, but it was just not a career fit for me. And so after having a little bit of a letdown in that area, I really wanted to find something that was going to challenge me, give me the career mobility that I was looking for, pay me appropriately, and would never leave me unemployed ever again. I was traumatized from the workspace. So I started teaching myself to code. This is while around 2015, 16. Again, bringing some of that entrepreneurial leaning with it. And I got in touch with the Python Philly Python users group, Philly Pug. And there's users groups in a lot of major metropolitan cities. And luckily that year, DjangoCon, the conference associated with Django, the Python web framework, was hosted in Philadelphia in 2016. So I did Django Girls. There are also similar programs in other languages like Vue and React and some other ones. I think Ruby has it as well. But it's a program. It's a one-day tutorial that you walk away with having a full stack Python web application and deployed to a free service. And it was incredibly empowering. And I was like, F yeah, you're not going to pull me away from the console ever again. I'm going to do this full time. It took a while to encourage or to find people to give me those real chances. So I kind of made them for myself with consulting. And there was a little bit of hustling with that. That's when I did my project management and then went back into consulting. And then I worked as a research engineer for UPenn for a while, and that was one of my favorite jobs. And now I'm at Microsoft. And so it's been a really cool journey. A lot of it is structured around the Django and Python IRL community. In talking to some things that we talked about before the call started, just like utilizing that network, making friends, and learning through osmosis from some really cool, smart people.
That's awesome. So I know that, and I think this is just like browsing around your website and just kind of like
Sure.
digging in and trying to, learn more about you. You're really big into the open source community. And I find that super interesting because much like you, taught myself to code, and, I took kind of a different route in that I did a lot of web development stuff, and I kind of, maybe if you want to call it, pigeonholed myself there, and then just kind of like directly hopped into a job afterward. I didn't really touch a lot of like open source stuff. And so I really wanted to kind of ask you about your journey into open source software and like what drives you to, contribute and learn more about the space.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm so glad you asked that. So It's really interesting because it feels like the barrier between just like doing the code, doing the software, and being in this open source community is really far, but it can be approached incrementally, and is far fewer degrees of separation from the average programmer who doesn't consider themselves in open source to be. I mean, there's 1 or 2 degrees separation from the work product of open source from almost all software out there. And I think that's being incredibly fair of 1 or 2 degrees. So I mostly came into that realm through the community space. So Django is an open source framework. There is a community engine behind it that has people many times gathering in person, also gathering virtually to talk about things going on with the framework. And a lot of open source work that propels the community forward happens in those spaces. So for volunteering to, I don't know, introduce someone onto stage, which was actually like my first DjangoCon volunteer opportunity, was just to introduce one of my friends on the stage.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was really cool, but like really I consider part of open source. And so a lot of my work has come away from the code, but is a lot with like mentoring and documentation and running events. I am now the treasurer of the Python Software Foundation. So making sure all of the trains are running on time is incredibly invaluable to open source work, and shows up in a lot of different communities of varying size. And that, having those relationships, has also made broaching open source code contribution a lot easier as well. I think the best communities to jump into, especially if you're more interested in the code than the other skills and the other making the train things that I attribute to making the trains run on time, which is fine. You do not have to be like a conference organizer to be part of open source, but that was my approachable way in. The best communities are ones where they have really good documentation. So if it is hard for you to be able to approach creating this new tool or starting contributing to this new tool, for example, people have been doing a lot with those AI visualization generators and things like that. So the fact that someone was able to integrate that with a Discord, for example, so someone who is not very interested in the code or has not approached the code before can still play with this tool, is part of open source work. And so having these ways of like writing documentation and creating approachable tools is how you bring people in, and asking the right questions and challenging the original authors to be able to write more documentation and answer your questions for the benefit of the entire community. It is invaluable, and people will be very, very thankful that you're asking the questions and contributing some work yourself as well.
Yeah, I imagine that a lot of the open source work that you've done, over the past few years has transferred pretty well to the current job that you're at right now with Microsoft.
Yeah.
And so in terms of, that kind of like work structure, are you working fully remote? Are you going kind of like a remote hybrid sort of thing? Or like what's kind of the work situation there?
Yeah, I'm 100% remote now. I was partially remote at Wharton as a research engineer for faculty. I am in Philadelphia, so it wasn't too bad. And then before that, I was consulting for a few years, so I was 100% remote. And I got just a little taste of that digital nomad stuff before they shut all of the things down. So I was working remote in London and Amsterdam for a few months in 2019. And that was really, really fun. So I've gotten some cool tips and tricks and tools and things that work for me in particular with working remote and also working in a fashion where I have many competing priorities. So like cutting a ticket, grabbing it, and coding until you're meeting the acceptance criteria, doing a PR code review and merging those in is by design very focused on making sure that the engineer is covering the task at hand and then merging that in and then moving on to the next thing. So having a job that really just cannot be fixed with that, because I have many stakeholders in many different realms, and I'm doing documentation, and I'm doing a video, and then I'm talking to this person, and then I'm doing an event organization over here. It's just different and a hard hill to climb, but I'm getting back into the swing of things.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So I think we can put a pause on the current work that you're doing right now, because I'm really interested to find out how you are juggling all of that, working remotely. But I also want to touch on, because I had remembered, because you had mentioned about the short stint of the digital nomad life that you lived when you traveled to Amsterdam. So I think that'd be really cool to touch on for a little bit. So tell me about like how you got that opportunity, like how the move was, and all that good stuff.
Sure. Okay, great. So I was working full-time at an e-commerce organization. I was doing full stack Node, and my bread and butter in the community that I really connected with was the Python community, and I wanted to do that full-time. So I got antsy. I had a little bit of savings, and I was like, F it, I'm just going to go travel the world. Let's just go do it. So I quit my job, and I had, at that point, 2 potential clients that would cover all of my expenses. And it was really just throwing a dart on the wall on what I think my expenses could be. I mean, like, I looked at flights, and I wanted to make sure that worst case scenario, I had X amount in my bank account so I can get an emergency flight home, and I had a family member I could stay with. And I was like, if something goes bad, I guess I'm just gonna like I can work at a restaurant. I'm really good at that. I'm a great server, and that takes skill. Like, I'm not trying to denigrate that, but just that is another skill I had that is flexible, and we'll see how this goes. And I was able to, as a pretty junior engineer, do full-time freelancing in Python and Django, and for about 2.5 years, and that definitely got me from my junior-ish to mid-level, and then further on to a more senior level engineer very, very quickly. You're getting thrown into the fire. So to talk about more of the things I do to stay organized, I am one who loves those written notes. I'm going to try the Remarkable. I hear good things.
Oh.
Yeah. Are you familiar with what the Remarkable is?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've seen it around, but I haven't like used it myself. I use Obsidian for literally everything. Like, I used to use Notion for a lot, but I use Obsidian now because I don't know. I'm just a really big fan of just plain Markdown stuff. It's just, you know.
2 thumbs up. I love making it simple if possible. So I'll write notes on everything. I have color-coded notes as well, and that questions are in purple, dates are in orange. I don't know why they do that. It just gives me the tingles.
Whatever works.
Right?
Whatever works.
Right? I don't know. And so each day I'll set on on my toggle, so my time tracking software. I'll start at the beginning, and this is when I'm clear and organized. It doesn't always work out this way, but I'll have a time slot called Getting My Shit Together, and it's when I am going through all of my notes from before, and then I respond to myself in a different color pen. So I'll have notes from a meeting, and I'll say, these are made up names, but John told me that we should work on X, Y, and Z project, and so then I'll respond to it saying, got this moving, sent an email, write the date number, 9/10, working on this, we're waiting on Susan's response. And by going back through my notes and adding this, like, by adding additional context to it, I am now having this conversation with myself and keeping myself focused on what forward looks like. And that's been helpful. I also like to highlight things that are to-dos or could be to-dos. So I'll have an idea, wouldn't it be cool if, and then I'll highlight it, and I'll kind of have more conversations on it, and then I'll break it down into more actionable to-dos of, like, email this person with this kind of context, see if they're into it, figure out what the budget is for X, Y, and Z, go look at a different resource from a different group and see if you can find how they did it. Let's see if we could do this on your own for a different context. And so those will be I could go for hours on it, but I have favorite pens, I have favorite notebooks, and that's been really, really helpful. And then when it goes to my digital text that I work on, I definitely like, I have a bookmarked, and it's called it's like a content editable thing in your browser. It's HTML. You basically are doing Control S and you save an HTML file. And there's no editing, there's no stylization in it unless you copy and paste from another source and add style to it. And I could share my screen. I've done it before. But if you're just imagining, it is a small text, and if you want to find that text, you can just Google it, content editable in your browser, and then it'll just give you a blank screen where you can just type on it, and it's just like a notepad. And so then I'll save that, and I'll add those notes to Trello cards. I love Trello a lot, and it does not play well with my Microsoft work, so I only use Trello for non-Microsoft work, but am still a very big fan of all of the features and the accoutrements of Trello's, and I could be a salesperson for Trello.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've gone through multiple iterations of like different tools and stuff and like different combos and whatnot. So has it taken you a while to just kind of like get that flow down to where you're just like, okay, this is it. I'm working with this. This is my set right now.
Totally. Yeah. But I give myself this. It's so funny because I actually try to extend this thought process to a lot of other places of work, but I try to like forgive myself for the time that I feel is idle or not productive, and just reiterate on the things that I know is working, right? And I think that was one of the things that I try to encourage the people that I mentor or myself when learning how to program was like, so you stared at the console for 45 minutes. That was not the most productive use of your time, but that's okay. This is basically the worst it gets. Being new to the console, being new to programming is the hardest it gets. Figure out what's working and then like move on, like keep moving forward, and trying to be like just kind with myself on how to move forward when I'm using my note-taking tool, but then I fall off for a few weeks. But then I realize, oh yeah, but note-taking really was fun for me and it made it so I felt like I understood what I was working on. Jump back into it. The shame of not opening that notebook up again doesn't help anyone. Just keep going. It sounds a little hokey, but these are literal things that I say to myself out loud.
Yeah.
Hopefully help somebody.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? I think we get like really hard on ourselves, especially when we like really try to add something in the mix of like a routine or try to like take something out. It's just like, oh, it was so good. The way it was going, it was so good. And now I have to like ruin it. And I feel like I'm ruining a bunch of progress that I just made. And it's just like, no, you're incrementally improving on that process. You're actually doing something good for yourself and the process itself. So it's just the way you look at it. Yeah.
Totally. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
What are your favorite tools? You mentioned that you have some things.
Yeah. So I was using Notion actually for a really long time for a lot of things. And then I started using Notion at work. And so that kind of ruined Notion for me because I had it all kind of like I have, different accounts and stuff like that. And I was just like, okay, I see how Notion's really good for a remote first startup where a bunch of people are working on these things asynchronously. Notion seems to solve that problem very, very well. I am just one person. I don't need all of what Notion provides me. It maybe for one person that has like a bunch of assistants or, people that like work for them, that would be awesome. But it's just me, currently right now. I don't need it. So I wanted to aim for something simpler. And that's how I found Obsidian. It's, pretty simple, kind of like the directory tree structure. The files they're markdown files. So it's really nice. You can sync it with your phone as well. Super simple. The syncs are really fast. I mean, it's It's nice and simple.
Oh, nice. I pulled it up. This is actually my first time seeing Obsidian. And there's
Oh,
these
yeah.
graph views and backlinks.
It's
Okay.
very
I'm getting
nice.
the vibe on it.
It's
Okay.
very nice. It's very nice. And, you know, obviously hit the dark mode immediately. And so
Oh, yeah.
it's just my vibe. It's really nice. It's super simple and it gets the job done. In terms of like scheduling stuff, I'm looking at the bottom of my like MacBook toolbar right now.
Mm-hmm.
I use this app called Fantastical for calendar, for like task stuff, like calendar scheduling and things like that. Fantastical is pretty good.
Okay.
It's like a souped up version of the Mac native like calendar app that comes pre-installed.
Interesting.
Um, and so that's been really good for scheduling like podcast episodes, or say, hey, I need to send Don this link for the podcast episode the day before, because, you know, if I forget, I'll have to do it the day of. I don't think for the audience that's listening, I don't think the link actually like went through in the email, and so I had to actually send it to her like 30 minutes beforehand. But anyways, it just helps with like scheduling and stuff like that, and it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's nice to look
Interesting.
at, all that good stuff.
First time I heard about Fantastical too. Gosh, this is your treasure trove. This is great.
I'm trying, and these are like the main two things that I use. In terms of like Trello like workflow stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
if I have a project that I've opened up on GitHub and I'm working on something, I'll just use GitHub issues, or I'll just use kind of like that board. But
See, I've stayed away from the GitHub issues, and then I'm on the core team of Wagtail, and they use GitHub projects a lot, and I really enjoy them. And so now we're starting to use. Right now, we use Azure DevOps for all of my Microsoft things, and then some on GitHub, but mostly Azure things. And I am getting really into the project and task management that GitHub provides you. It's really cool.
yeah, I haven't dug like super deep into all the cool like kind of things that you can do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just started to use it for like simple, like, you know, task management sorts of things, because I have like, there's just like multiple like smaller projects that I'm just like working on. It's just, I don't want to have all of those to-dos in one kind of like board. I would rather have them separated to each, you know, kind of GitHub board that matches to each project. It just seems like a one-to-one kind of simple match. So I haven't necessarily used anything fancier than Notion. I don't know. Notion seems like the fanciest that you can really get in terms of like all-in-one, you know, apps for task management and note taking and, you know,
Totally.
all that good
So
stuff. So
I'm getting back into OneNote. I used OneNote in college, and not to be a Microsoft shill, but I really enjoyed it. And so I'm getting back into, and they have these really cool this cool feature now where when you open up a new meeting, you have shared notes. It has a OneNote, and it's like shared notes for each meeting. And it will automatically, if you enable it, automatically create subnotes for each meeting inside a book. That is now like one of the one-on-ones that I have with my boss. And it has almost all of the same features that I think that OneNote has, or excuse me, Notion has. So I'm getting into that. I do enjoy that. I have another question for you.
sure.
What are you using for tracking your time if you're doing that?
Oh, tracking my time. Absolutely nothing. My brain, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I recommend Toggle. It's very simple. I've been on the free version for years. I've been on it for so long that I should probably just pay, just because that would be nice. I've been using their services. But I think it's been like this life hack that I have for me, especially when I have a 9 to 5 kind of work responsibilities, but then I have a lot of things that sometimes are gray area or fall out of it. I'd like to know how long it took me to work on this blog post. Secret is too long. But it's nice to kind of have that balance of at least this gut check of knowing how long something's taking me. And then to also treat my passion projects like I'm my own client. So I have good ideas. I have really cool things that I'm working on. I should treat myself and give myself just as much time as I'm giving all of the other clients that are actually paying. I should pay my, quote unquote, I should pay myself. in some of the time and hours that I actually know my ideas are worth. So I've been recommending that to almost all of the new freelance devs that I've talked to. I really, really think it's important to track my time. And it helps me. So maybe it'll be a good nugget of wisdom for other people.
I've been really like struggling with time tracking in terms of right after work, right? Like once I get off of work, there's dinner, there's this thing that I need to do in the garage that's going to take God knows how long. There's, I gotta walk Obi, my dog. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. And so it's really difficult to try to not necessarily track that stuff, but more so track like the tasks that I'm working on so that I can make sure that I put 30 minutes into learning Elixir or an hour into researching this thing that I was like mashing my head up against during work that I couldn't figure out. Right. And trying to make sure that I like get those 30 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day doesn't necessarily really matter, just as long as I put some time towards it. Because I mean, after work, I'm just kind of like mentally drained. I'm sure you are too. It's just a lot. And so being able to like see that, or I guess get that immediate feedback of like, oh yeah, I did spend like a good 45 minutes like learning something new. And it's been really kind of, it'll be really nice to be able to see that visually rather than like thinking in my head, like, did I spend 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 45? I don't remember. That was so long ago.
It's at 100%. And so then even when I'm not good at like keeping up with it, I'll just like stick like 15 minutes. I know I did maybe 15 or 30. I'll stick 15 minutes on the calendar, or in my toggle, and shaking.
All good.
And I know that it'll give me a good estimation of just how I'm spending my time. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but totally. I mean, I get off of work and I'm like, oh God, how did it turn into 9:30 already? What happened? Yeah.
Time warp.
Right.
Work, time warp. So I think we all, or I think most of us have that kind of like switch over from, working in a mostly like in-office setting or like hybrid setting to like fully remote. Do you remember, or can you think back to when you first made that switch? What were the most like frustrating things about that time in your life, in your career?
Yeah, I think some of the frustrating parts are still frustrating, and it's just part of humans and interacting with humans. It's always communication things. But it's, you could sit right next to a coworker and be like, I know I understand the words you're saying, but what vibe are you giving off? So would you like to move forward or not? Is this a bad idea or a good idea? Just give me your vote, bro. Yeah. And I think that's also hard with like communication that's written or just not like async a lot of times. I do like getting on calls with people. I like the culture of getting on calls with people and having our cameras off. I think it makes people more comfortable, and I think when I'm focusing on someone's voice, it tends to end up being more expressive that way. So there's different things and nuances you have to navigate through when it's online, but it's almost always async. And so async communication is the toughest. So, and I also think that's one of the reasons why open source is not really approachable for some people, because you're sitting there kind of sending out a question into the ether, almost admitting that you don't understand something to someone you've never met and who is supposedly the expert on it. Holy crap, how's that conversation going to go? I think you cut out a lot of crap when you just lead with kindness. That sounds really hokey, but like lead with kindness, and like people are going to either respond kindly or not at all. And I am in the same place if you don't respond at all. Work is a little different. We have a little bit more of the added incentive of trying to all work on the same thing and getting that response back, the workplace rapport. My first few places used Slack a lot. That was a really good tool. Slack is still my favorite and my baby. Discord, I feel a little too old for Discord. It's just always something. There's all these new reactions and memes and icons and things going on.
Right.
And it just is a little bit overwhelming to me, but I do feel very cool when I'm on Discord, and I'm a part of a number of them, way more Slacks than Discord. And now I'm on Teams, like the infamous Teams, that it's literally just a meme on the internet like 2 days ago about Teams not being what you find in Discord and Slack. I like it. I think there's been a lot of growth in Teams these days, and this is not Microsoft telling me to say these things. Teams isn't even my product.
Blink twice if you're being held hostage.
I'm fine. But I'm not. I think it gets the job done. I try to stay away from emails. Emails will just like be the death of me. For some reason, trying to go into my inbox is always overwhelming. But there's a couple of cool methodologies for filtering your email inbox so you can get to the crux of what you need to. So I filter out events. I filter out when I'm on CC because those are lower priority. I also filter out people when they say response requested or when it is an emergency. There is a tendency to have that more in my work settings rather than my personal email. And then I also filter out internal and external communications by email addresses that are important. And then also I definitely filter out all of the automatic GitHub notifications so I can have them coordinated by repo or project level. And that helps even out my inbox sometimes too.
Yeah, I think like no matter what tool you use, email is like always annoying. I don't think like I mean I know that that's a problem that is like still like kind of needs to be solved. I know there are things like Superhuman, but like even then I have work colleagues who use Superhuman and they're just like, I mean, it's good, but it's like I still have things that are annoying about email that I just like don't like, and I don't feel like I'm getting like you know the most value out of it. I find that really being cautious about who I expose my email to, especially like my work email and the email that I use for this podcast stuff, you know, the business that I run and things like that. Like I'm very, very cautious about that. Even like down to the newsletters that I sign up for. I try to go through each and every single one, read a newsletter and say, has this really like provided me value over the past like 4 weeks? No? Okay, I'm just unsubscribe. I am that person who loves to unsubscribe from newsletters. I revel in that action so hard. So
I feel you. I've signed up for more newsletters in the past several months than I have ever. I used to be newsletter averse. Now I am newsletter wary. But my goal now with my new role is to keep the pulse of the Python community. So what once was like fun, now I'm like, oh my God, am I catching all of the things that everyone is talking about? What are the movers and shakers thinking? So that's been a little bit overwhelming. So I should probably do a good newsletter purge sometime soon. And I respect that. But can you tell me more about Superhuman? I've never heard of this one.
Yeah, so Superhuman is just an app that basically tries to like declutter a lot of your email inbox. Now, I haven't used it personally, but I know it's a way to kind of like remove a lot of the headaches that traditional email, like your Gmail, for instance, like your Gmail has a lot of like, it gets rid of, it's good at detecting a lot of spam, but it's pretty bad at allowing you to really like get through a lot of the I would say like getting to the main things that you want to get to, like the real conversations that you're having in email is just like buried within newsletters and buried within a bunch of stuff. Obviously you can do like the manual work of like separating that stuff out, but like if you don't, it can get messy and like frustrating. And so I think that Superhuman like tries to help you with a lot of that stuff and tries to make it not so tries to make email like not so distracting.
Totally.
But
I'm looking it up and it's hard to tell if it's I think it's another email client
It is.
that integrates from your other. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
cool.
So I guess it just allows you to be more efficient with your workflow when it comes to email, which I guess, is definitely like a big problem to solve. But for me, I think it's just more intelligent email clients that can like separate out the newsletters and the, stuff people are trying to like sell to you, and then the actual like conversations that you're having with like real people.
What is the governing body that is supposed to protect us from spam calls and maybe hypothetically spam emails and hypothetically spam mail, snail mail?
I
Whatever
don't
that
know, but I know that for spam calls, I feel like it's the FCC, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
Federal Communications Commission. You are absolutely right. They need to get in their bag
Yeah.
and need to save my email. I actually get too much mail, physical snail mail, just weird, random things.
Mm-hmm.
I need them to get in their bag and save us, because these spam calls are ridiculous. I can't deal. I can't.
I agree. I don't know. I have a couple of thoughts about the FCC and the FTC, but I will leave that for another podcast. This is not the podcast for that.
Okay. Tune into that episode. I'm hyped for when it comes out.
If I don't know, I got to think up of a name for it, maybe like the Tinfoil Hat podcast or something like that. I don't know. We'll see.
I would listen. That's
see.
so great.
We'll see. I gotta go on like Google Domain and see. I gotta, the normal thing. Gotta check the domains and check all the, We'll see. I'll keep you updated.
Cool.
But so I think I have like one big like last question, in terms of like working remotely in general, and you've touched on this like at multiple points throughout the episode, but I think like bringing it all together, like working with a distributed team is like, it's just tough, right? I think you are trying to coordinate on a bunch of different things. Questions can pop up in your head, and although you want them to be responded to immediately, they can take hours sometimes because the other person that has the answer might be caught up in some other question that they're trying to answer as well.
Totally.
And so how do you manage that, I think internally within yourself, but also like externally with like, like you said, stakeholders, you're interacting with different stakeholders. How do you kind of juggle different priorities, different questions that need to be answered? Like, do you throw something to the back because you know that something won't be answered like immediately today, or like how do you prioritize things?
Totally. So full circle on that one. That's really great. Especially since I'm in Eastern time zone. I work with people primarily in the Pacific time zone. I have a lot of people in GMT, like UK time zone. And then one of my coworkers that I work closely with is actually in Australia. So when I'm getting off work, he's getting on, and I'm like, but can you let me know if this is the newest version of the diagram? All I need to know if this is the latest version, if I can run with it, please. And that's tough. But so if I can, don't be afraid to bump things to the top of people's emails saying, hey, thanks so much. Just wanted to bump this for your attention. I almost never get mad when someone does that. I mean, if I'm irritated enough that they're going to bump it to the top of my email, means I should have politely declined on that interaction previously. So it's only waiting in my inbox because I really, really genuinely intended to respond sooner than this, and I'm so sorry. So I recommend that, and being brave with that, and I tell that to mentees as well, because I have things on my plate, and sometimes things just like fall off. I also like to have work products, and try my best to, if I'm collaborating with someone, whether or not someone else is going to be the first to put some words to paper, fine, they may be dragging their feet, so I'm going to put words to paper. And it's going to be my best shot of what we needed, and then I'm going to tag an individual, and I'm going to ask them to respond in the comments. And I think that's a really helpful way of moving things forward. I think a lot of developers, who are Excel averse. Like, I went to business school, so I love me some Excel. And we don't necessarily need it. I mean, I think a lot of times we handle things out in like documentation or programmatically, and Excel kind of gets on the back burner, but has its own, or Sheets, has its own place where you can, I used Excel for wireframes, for things. So I like, F all of those other wireframe tools. I use Excel. All you got to do is remove all the grid lines and start blocking out outlines, and then do little arrows to what you think that circle is supposed to actually mean. And they're lo-fi mock-ups. So those two things, I think, in particular, are really helpful, like nailing people down to some of their words as well, of like having notes following up at the end of meetings and saying, here's how I interpreted what our meetings were. Here's our 5 action items, and I'm going to follow up next week on their progress. This is an optional meeting. Oh, I love those. Having very low effort, kind of working planning meetings. People can kind of come in. They serve almost like office hours. So I am on the Wagtail core team, and I'm working with the Google Summer of Code contributors. So that means that we have a handful of new contributors who've never contributed to open source before, and then a handful of very, very senior open source contributors who are very comfortable with Wagtail in particular. And you have different methods of communication, and then people being too scared to ask, or not assuming people already know. Mm-hmm. So every other Tuesday at 10 a.m. I have an hour-long meeting, and I say anyone can come in, and I'm going to take notes about everything we talk about, and then I'm going to disseminate them back out into a shared channel. And it's really easy for me, because if no one shows up, I'm still working. I'm just like sitting on a call. And if people do show up, I already have this hour dedicated to making sure we have this time to discuss whatever might happen. And I'm also like connecting some dots. Some person is having a problem with A and a related problem B, and I'm merging them together and saying, hey, you guys are going to be able to help each other out, move forward with me not on the call, because I don't have time to solve it for you. So I guess maybe those are my 4 tips. Office hours, holding people to notes after meetings, starting with collaborative work documents, and like tagging people, and don't be afraid to remind someone, hey, respond to me.
Yes, that's a really good, I love the don't be afraid to, like, you know, ping people back on things, right? I think, and I hate generalizations, but I'm going to use one right now.
Sure.
I think if you're on a team that wants to get stuff done, I think a majority of people are going to appreciate being pinged back about things, especially if they have so many other things going on. But it's really hard as the person who is pinging that person to feel like they're not being a nuisance, or to feel like they're not being bothersome. And I think that that's only going to get solved, or I guess that feeling of like, oh, I'm like bothering somebody. It's just, you just got to get that first one out. Get that second one out. And hopefully those first few times you'll get a good response back. You'll get good feedback back. And that sort of feedback loop will help you be a little bit more confident in doing that. Because I know I've been a part of teams where I have tried to ping somebody back on something, and they'll say, no, I'm busy. And I'm just like, oh shit, well, I'm just not going to do that anymore. So it hurts. It hurts. Yeah, it hurts.
Like, it hurts. Softy on the outside and the inside, and it does hurt. But at the same time, I try to tell myself, and clearly I have this very warm and fuzzy way of treating myself and others. I want everyone to be softer to everyone. But so I'll say, like, what is the worst case scenario if like someone doesn't respond back to me or doesn't respond well? And I'm fine. Like, I think it'll be, and I know that I can handle the fallout of whatever could tumble. And I think that early in my career as a very confident, very opinionated Black woman in project management, I ruffled a couple of feathers. I was like, no, that button should not have rounded corners, and that button should have rounded corners, or X, Y, and Z. And I was like, why is she so confident? She just got here. And it doesn't, and even when I'm trying to just be really innocuous and kind and give my opinion in an open forum when my opinion was asked, it didn't always like work great. But I think directness has always been my tool of choice, because in that scenario, and then I get weird vibes, and I'm like, oh gosh, are there weird vibes? Are we cool? And it just shocks people into like a, oh no, I think we're fine. So I don't know if it's the best tool. Is what I've been doing, but like lead with radical kindness and like be direct, and I'm sure I can handle the fallout. I don't know. I need this document signed, please. Answer.
Kindness and directness, usually that combination works well 9 times out of 10. Like, people are going to appreciate both kind of, both things in combination, right? Like, they're going to respect it, and they're going to probably like you a little bit more for, delivering it with some kindness as well.
Flies with honey. If I were ever in the business of attracting flies, I'm going to start with honey. However, I do not, although this is my natural approach, and we can work with a therapist on whether or not it's the best one, I don't know, but I try not to tone police. No, I don't tone police. And I love when specifically Black femmes like stand up and are like, hey, so pay attention to me. This is an important thing. I'm disseminating information. Heed it. It is important. __. So just because it's something that works with me, I like implore all like marginalized people, melanated people, people of the diaspora to figure out their vibe that works for them, and then get this brain trust of people that they trust and can be their kind of court of opinion to chat about intentions and motives and people and best practices and grow yourself with these people. Like having a really solid crew of professionals who are also in my career and just like don't mince words and can tell me like, Dawn, you need to be more direct, or that was a little too direct. You should chill out. Your expectations are a little over the moon. This is not their center priority and you shouldn't expect it to be such. I love having that like back and forth with people. So growing that network has been really, really important for those things too.
Yeah, that's like the hallmark of being realistic with yourself and allowing other people to like, if you trust them, if you trust their judgment, having that constructive, feedback is like super, super important. It goes back to having the good network with people. So, but that was the last like serious question. That was the last like the big question. I think and I always like these types of podcasts is where like at the end we'll ask like rapid fire questions, but rapid fire questions that are like, pertain to the actual, subject matter, right?
I got it. I'm ready.
I've always been interested. I've always been interested in other people's like workflows. Obviously we've had a very in-depth conversations about the different tools that we use and things like that. And so I'm always interested in other people's like, for the nerds out there, their battle stations, like the tools that they use and stuff like that, like all that stuff. I'm into it. So, are you down for a good, like 3 or 4 rapid fire questions?
I'm down. I'm ready.
Okay. Sweet. What's the most useful thing in your home office right now?
My couch.
It's
my napping couch.
Nice. I love it.
Between meetings. Yep.
I like the style too. That's a very nice couch.
Thank you. My partner got it for me. Thanks.
I like it. What's the most recent purchase you made for your home office?
Oh, and I'm not even using it right now. It's my mic. It's my desk mic. It's a standing one. I don't know if I like it enough. I went with the low cost standing desk mic, but I think I just need to up the price level a little bit to get a better quality. But right now, my headphones have been really keeping me in check.
The audio's coming in clear, so I don't know.
Okay.
It's giving that mic a run for its money if you haven't used it.
I know. I tried them next to each other, and I was like, I don't see a difference. And the mic and the headphones make me feel cool. I don't know.
Headphones are also really nice as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. What should be the first thing someone buys for their office?
Ooh. The desk. Desk should be first. And like the second should be a good desk chair. And people want to go for those fancy gaming chairs. No, gaming chairs are made to look cool. They are not made to be comfortable. F a gaming chair. Get one of those ones with like the mesh on the back, and you should spend around 100 to 150 in 2022 standards.
Here. I'm all for it. I thought a lot about buying a gaming chair, and I was like, no. I've heard too many conflicting stories, and when you hear conflicting stories about things, it's just like, you know, you gotta find the average, and I couldn't find an average because there were just so many long tail comments. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm good. I'm good on that.
Oh, and a special note that you didn't ask for is buy a desk chair that fits the desk that you're working with. So I have this, and I am being a weird hipster right now, but I'm working on a old roll top wooden desk. So it is not made for the 27-inch screen that I have like pushed to the side, and then my PC right here, and I have another screen that I actually just gave up on. But I also have like a chair with the armrest that pull up, so I can like scoot in more. And I have one that like lets me lean back a little bit, but not too far back because that freaks me out. So just kind of figuring out the things that you like. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah, the dimensions are important. That's a really, really good point. The dimensions are super important. Like I have exhausted the width of this standing desk right now, and so I'm gonna get I'm thinking about getting a 60-inch. Right now, I think I have a 48-inch, and
Nice.
so I need to get one that's a little bit longer. So that's on the horizon. But for right now,
living like royalty.
everything barely fit. I'm moving on up. Things barely fit right now, so it's time.
Nice.
So last question, what's the best part about working home for you?
Oh my God, doing my laundry in the middle of meetings, like, is so, okay, not in the middle, between meetings, we'll say between meetings. Yeah, and I have my camera off sometimes, so people may get the wrong idea I'm folding laundry in the middle of meetings.
I do it too. I do it too. I don't know. The founders of the company that I work for will probably be watching this. Hey, I do laundry during meetings sometimes. So
But you have a happy, productive employee, and isn't that
absolutely
great for everyone?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my laundry machine is right there out of frame, and I will be folding laundry in the day sometimes while I'm thinking about a problem I need to solve for Microsoft.
Makes sense.
Totally.
Makes sense. Cool. Well, Dawn, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge just about open source, the tools that you've been using, and just kind of like the tactics that you use on a day-to-day basis working remotely. Like, I think a lot of this is going to help not only me, but for the listeners out there. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited to tune in, and it's been great chatting, and I'm looking forward to keeping in touch. We're friends on the interwebs. We're gonna stay in touch, so I'm excited to keep in contact.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dawn. Appreciate it.